the warrior culture. So in a sense, you had a replacement of the warrior culture with the Judeo-Christian culture, but you also had the emergence of the commercial class or the commercial culture, where instead of the warrior being the example that people look to the entrepreneur, the merchant. And instead of asserting oneself, producing, creatively producing became an activity that people followed. And one of the, Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations is arguing against what he called as mercantilism. Mercantilism is when you have, that wealth comes from the distribution of a certain, not the accumulation of a certain amount of goods. And Adam Smith said, no, wealth is the freely available goods and services at a affordable price for all people. And so he argued that mercantilism, or this static view of zero sum, is one of the things that leads nations to war. So in his Wealth of Nations, he's not just talking about economics, he's talking about the relations between nations and how nations get ahead. If you had a free market approach to economy, and you had a win-win mentality, and people were pursuing productivity rather than competing over what they considered a limited supply of goods, then you're more likely to have peace between nations than conflict. And this was a secularization of the Christian view but in economic terms. But it was part of the same idea that instead of asserting oneself in entrepreneurial activity, you are trying to create a product that someone else will want. So in order to be successful, there's got to be a certain sense of understanding someone else's wants and needs. And this is a secular economic version of giving oneself for the sake of others, which is a Christian moral virtue. So you have an economic approach that jibes well with this Christian moral virtue, and the rise of the capitalist mercantilist class created a focus upon the commercial virtues and the entrepreneurial virtues rather than the martial virtues too. So Dr. Kagan doesn't go into this, but many classical liberal scholars have. And so I think that is something that needs to be taken into consideration as well, because it's there's been a lot of material written on this, and I think there's a lot to it. Now, again, we talked about the idea that the concern for peace and the concern for justice and freedom, particularly freedom, was two sides of the same coin. So, you can't have one without the other. And this expression of this belief was very passionately expressed by Patrick Henry when they were having a debate as to whether or not they should go to war with England. Because someone was saying, no, we want to have peace. Peace, peace, peace. So this is a famous speech given by Patrick Henry, and this is his answer to this idea that we shouldn't go to war with England because we want to have peace. And he says, "In vain, sir, to extenuate the matter, gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears a clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand you here idle? What is it that the gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet to be purchased at the price of change and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God, for I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." So the last part, obviously, is very famous. Give me liberty, give me death. But this speech came about in the context of the debate as to whether or not they should go to war with England. And the reason given why we don't want to go to war is because we value peace. And so this is Patrick Henry's answer to that. Yeah, we value peace, but there's not going to be any peace without justice, and you can't have justice without freedom. Give me liberty or give me death. That's how important liberty was to him. And they realized you couldn't have peace without liberty. So they rejected, there's a notion in the communist, in the Russian language, communists use a certain word for peace that translated roughly into lack of opposition or lack of resistance. The jihadis, the radical version of Islam, they have an Arabic word for peace that translates into lack of opposition. So if you submit to us, we're going to have peace. And so, yeah, all you need to do is become slaves. And that's what he's saying. He's saying, is peace so sweet or life so dear to be purchased at the price of change of slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. No, no way. So he rejects this notion that if we just, be quiet and let them have their way, we're going to have peace. And this was something that they understood very well. That if the price of peace is submitting to tyranny, to totalitarianism, then it is a Faustian bargain, and a bargain to be rejected. So that was an understanding that they had, and there was still some, okay, we're going to go to war to fight again for our freedom, but there was still an understanding that basically they still wanted to have peace, and there was a problem that a lot of them had with standing armies during peacetime. Okay, we need to raise an army to fight the war, yes, but during peacetime they didn't believe they should have a standing army. And that was something that was very widespread, and particularly among the Jeffersonians, and so much so that in Declaration of Independence they're arguing, this is one of their criticisms of the king. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without consent of our legislature. So standing armies during time of peace is one of the things that they were accusing the king of doing. And so now that the Revolutionary War is on, they got to raise an army, but now it's over. When it's over with, they go back to having peace. They don't need a standing army. Well, that's what they thought. But then you got France and Spain and England, and they're all circling around. You've got France is here, Spain is over here, and England's got some colony here, and up in France has got certain parts of Canada. England's got another part, the Southwest. A lot of the Southwest was Spanish territory. And they did not expect the colonies to survive long. So they're circling like vultures, ready for this carcass to be picked apart. And so now there's this attention, because a standing army was considered to be a threat to liberty. And the martial virtues of military culture is a threat to liberty. And so this was something this is a tension. And this is a tension within the pro-liberty movement even to this day. You got some libertarians who do not want a bunch of military overseas. They don't say we shouldn't have a standing army, but then you have some who are saying, well, we have to defend ourselves. So this tension goes all the way back throughout and has existed in American civilization from the very beginning, because on the one hand, you got forces that want to do us ill, and even if we mind our business, they still want to do us ill, and they'll find this out later. On the other hand, a standing army during peacetime is considered a threat to our liberty, and not compatible with this view that we're overturning the martial virtues, and that we're creating a peaceful society where war is not the thing that we're always aiming for. So this is a tension that is going on, and there's particularly the Jeffersonians, which was the ones who were strongest advocates of liberty, as opposed to the ones who followed Hamilton, the Federalist. The Jeffersonians strongly advocated against a standing army during peacetime. What changed that? Well, you had the incident with the Barbary pirates, where during the time when the Americans were a colony of England, their ships were protected by the tribute that the British paid to the Barbary pirates. So they were left alone. As soon as they became an independent nation, their ships are not protected anymore by this tribute. So now they're subject to being boarded and their people being enslaved by the Barbary pirates. And so Jefferson and John Adams assume that this is all a big misunderstanding. They assume that they're at war, they have conflicts for one reason or another with the European nations. And as soon as they realize that we are, now I'm paraphrasing their thought process, I'll get into their quotes in a minute, but as soon as they realize that we are neutral, and that we only want, what is the phrase, peaceful trade, peaceful commerce with all nations, entangling alliances with none. And that was the foreign policy they intended to follow